the next round of talks, we're going to do a round of lightning talks. So this next section is going to be short, quick project updates that are each about 5 minutes long. And what we're going to do is, I'll do the first one. Mine might be slightly more than 5 minutes. I'm going to try to keep it down. Well, let's time me. And then I will answer questions. I'll take maybe 2 questions, but I'll answer questions while the next person is setting up their computer. So we're going to try to turn this around quickly because we want to pack in a bunch of rapid fire information before our brains collapse from all the inputs. And then after that, we'll go to lunch. And lunch will be right out here in the lobby. So beginning my talk, this is an overview of the whole IPFS and libp2p ecosystem, or a review of that ecosystem. So it echoes some of the things you saw in Juan's keynote, and it's also pointing forward to some of the lightning talks you're going to see, or sessions that you'll see proposed for the week. And an important starting point when you're looking at this ecosystem around IPFS and libp2p, I need to set my timer, is that we're asking this question of who gets to be a peer on the internet. And we're building the tools or building towards a future where everyone has access to the technical capacity of being a peer on the internet. And so there are a lot of factors to that, because that's not just about technical possibility, it's also about who has access to the technology, who has the knowledge to wield that technology. So we're working in a big, ambitious space, and our many different projects, which sometimes seem scattered, are touching many things because we're trying to upgrade the whole web, the whole system, to give everyone this technical capacity. So 3 key items in here are IPFS. Again, as you saw in Juan's keynote, we haven't finalized a mission statement for IPFS. So these are not, what are in these slides are not mission statements. They're more like a gesture, a reminder of what these projects are focused on. So IPFS is focused on upgrading the web to be content addressed. And which that means identifying a content by what it is rather than identifying content by where it is. And then having done that, having that identifier space, allowing people to exchange data peer-to-peer without relying on central parties. In order to achieve that, we need libp2p. We need a robust networking stack and libraries that allow us to find peers, connect with them securely, and exchange data directly with them without relying on central parties. So it's that second part of the IPFS purpose that is primarily tackled by libp2p. And then there's no point in having all that connectivity if we can't actually express our data in ways that it's useful. So that's where IPLD comes in. And this is in a way, like one of the more heady, big picture projects is thinking in terms of a unified model for expressing any data that is content addressed or linked with hashes anywhere on the network, being able to compute and process and find that data. So to go a little bit more detail into each of those projects, IPFS speaks to many different things for many different people. So there's the sense of resilience, of imagining a Library of Alexandria that can't be burned. So how do you achieve that? How do you achieve data existing in many places and being held in ways that it can't be lost? Building distributed applications, making it possible for people to build offline first applications, purely peer-to-peer applications, blockchain-based applications. Then there's data stewardship, allowing people excuse me, to manage their data, coordinate storage of that data, replicating it, describing it, analyzing it, recontextualizing it. Excuse me, which leads to this, could someone grab water for me? Which leads to this topic of possession and participation. So what data will we choose to possess? What data will we participate in redistributing or decline to participate in redistributing? So, sorry, that gets at all these topics of censorship and coordination. And then, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm coughing. And then the final topic would be immutable distributed data for machine analysis. And there's the burgeoning uses there. Meanwhile, libp2p handles most of the many or most of the really difficult challenges of IPFS. So it's handling things like NAT traversal, the DHT, content routing, peer discovery. This is the stuff that makes it possible for IPFS to function as a peer-to-peer network. But the interesting thing is that it's not just IPFS that needs that. It's anyone who's building peer-to-peer applications. And so this is where libp2p is growing into its own thing with a broader use of users, or a broader set of users. And then finally, IPLD is making it possible to link across systems and formats, version metadata, querying data, transforming data, doing all of these things in distributed ways. It's tackling the data structures in order to make that possible. Now, all three of those things intersect when you start applying these technologies. And you want to deal with things like access control, reader privacy, writer privacy, real-time updates of data on a network, handling identity, censorship, allow lists and block lists, also indexing data, querying it, versioning it, discovery of the data. It relies on all of these pieces being assembled in ways that actually work for people. And so how do we achieve that? Our approach is to build community structures and decision-making structures that allow many, many people to participate in imagining what's possible and build the tools that make those things possible. And so a key thing here is that the innovation on the protocol, we're configuring things so that the innovation on the protocol is driven by product development that's focused on users in the world. So if you're developing products and you're engaged in a working group, those are the things that ultimately drive the priorities for implementing the protocols and strengthening them and making them more robust. Meanwhile, in order to achieve this and actually include as many people as possible in this innovative process, this reimagining of the future, we need to work really hard on having a genuinely diverse, global, inclusive community that's using open source principles. And then fundamentally, like Juan hammered on in a lot of ways, ship stuff that works. Just work really hard to polish what we make and make it work really well for people and make it easy to use. A preview, some of these working groups are giving lightning talks, so you'll get a lot more detail of them. There's the core working group, which coordinates the overall mission and activities of IPFS and libp2p, and also just coordinates the RFC process and the rest of the working groups. And then there's the core implementations, go IPFS, JS IPFS, go libp2p, JS libp2p, et cetera. Then we have the web browsers and GUI working groups, documentation working group. We have all the activities around community ops that Michael is spinning up. We have the dynamic data and capabilities working group dealing with these challenges of data structures and dynamic data and encryption and identity for building applications in a distributed context. We have the work around decentralized data stewardship that Michelle Hertzfeld is taking on. And then we have an infrastructure team that's doing a huge amount. So that's a sampling of the working groups that we have. If you think there's something missing here, propose a working group. And we'd be eager to hear about it and how you want to form it. And then a sampling of some of the growth that you can see. libp2p is starting to fly on its own, it's moving towards being its own organization that is very much interlinked with the IPFS organization, but it's able to have its own meetings, its own stakeholders, its own roadmaps. And Mike Golzer is leading that. Introducing the PeerStar framework, which is a framework for building decentralized applications, and that includes PeerPad and the other applications that are using the PeerStar libraries. And then expanding our support for decentralized data stewardship and making IPFS work really well for large volumes of data. And then finally, all of this work around scaling working groups, reimagining how we can use OKRs to work in a large, open, distributed way. So that's where we get to this meeting, which is an important milestone in the growth of the community. We're making this venue for high bandwidth interactions between people in our community so that we can align in terms of mission, values, roadmaps, objectives, and then also figure out how to showcase people's work and promote it and celebrate it. So this is very exciting. And that is also a precursor to having an IPFS Conf, which we're aiming to do in Lisbon in November. And that will be a much larger venue for people to gather and learn about IPFS and share their work. So that, I hope this helps as a preview of what you're going to see in people's individual slides from different working groups and teams. And so then if, David, are you next? All right. So while David's setting up his laptop, does anyone have questions for me?